Welcome back, everyone, to our next episode of Soho Convo. I'm here with Aaron, founder, writer, podcast creator of Truth Island podcast. If you like deep think, if you like asking those larger existential questions, I highly recommend you check out his podcast on Spotify. It's called Truth Island. He has amazing guests. And occasionally I was in the early phase ruining it. But everyone he has on just has some incredible insights. And I highly encourage you to check it out. So welcome to Soho Convo.
Thank you. Great to be here. And I make this joke on every podcast that I'm on. It's so good to be on a podcast I don't have to edit myself.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of takes off the scary portion of it, right? You just go in, you talk, you give your opinion, and then you get to go home. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. Then when you do your own podcast, you have to like edit the whole thing. And it's actually the conversation doesn't really seep in until you listen into it again. So I actually do like that because sometimes people will say things to you.
Right.
And you won't hear it the first time, but then you hear it a second time and then you're like, that's what that person meant. So it's also a learning exercise as well.
What do you think that is? Do you think that the second time around, the person figured out a better way to make it land? Or is it the second time around, the person listening figured out how to accept what was being said?
For me, I can say that you don't understand the conversation until you're already on top of the mountain.
Right.
Because when you're just having a conversation in the moment, you have no idea where it's going. But once the conversation is already climaxed and you're at the top of the mountain, then you can appreciate every little detail and twist and turn that got you there.
Right. And you're able to take in the vistas that you've just accumulated, you've built up.
Yeah, because you don't know anything in life is a historic landmark until it becomes one. So you might have a conversation, okay, like I don't know where this guy's going, I don't know what the point is of that. But then once you see where the conversation ended, you can say to yourself, if I hadn't asked that question, we would never have gotten to point Y.
Right.
So yeah, I think I learn a lot from re-listening to old conversations.
Wow. Do you have one in mind? Do you have like one that you saved that you go back to?
It's a good question. I kind of listen to each one through Audacity. I'll listen to it again and again, and I'll edit it and just write. But they're all my children, so I love them all equally at this point.
I mean, you really do approach it with that amount of care. The conversations that we would have before the start of an episode was just really, really deep. And there was a lot of feeling to each subject matter that you had on your podcast. So I'm wondering, I know they're all your children. You can't really pick one. Do you have one in mind that you think would be a good introduction to your pod?
I think a good introduction is what I believe the title is, I don't know offhand, What Makes a Philosopher? I think it's in the 50s. I did that with my friend Kenny. And we actually talked about all the quirks. And we also talked about why philosophers are not liked all that much and why they always look like they're staring into the abyss.
Right. When you say 50s, you mean episode 50?
Yeah.
Because you have like 170, right?
Yeah, 100 and just recorded the 176th. And I'm a few episodes behind on the uploads, but that will be coming out soon.
We understand that, right, Nacho? Dude, we've known each other for a while. You know what's weird is we first became friends randomly off Craigslist.
Yeah.
Right before the pandemic. Right?
Yeah, I remember I took out an ad in Craigslist just looking to talk to people. And you were, I think I took like 3 waves of that and you were on the first wave. And this is literally, a few months into the pandemic. People think the world is ending.
So it did start. The pandemic did start. Honestly, my sense of time with the pandemic is like, it's Mandela effect after Mandela effect. So did it begin?
I break the pandemic into 2 parts, the pre-vaccine and the post-vaccine.
Right.
And we actually met in person pre-vaccine.
Right.
So people were just scared at this time. They were people were wearing masks, they were wearing gloves, and I just took out this ad on Craigslist, and you were like, your enthusiasm just immediately got to me. You were like, let's do this in person. And I was like, what? It's like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I I drove all the way down to Brooklyn from Queens. And sure enough, you had hand sanitizer and we did it. And,
and that was in my old $1,600 2-bedroom in Bushwick.
Yeah.
Why the fuck did I get rid of that? It was so stupid.
And we had like sound issues and everything.
Oh, it was awful. Yeah, because we were surrounded by stone. You know, so it was reverb after reverb. It was just problem after problem. But it was such a great conversation. Do you remember what we talked about?
It was so great. Why don't you remember?
I think it was. I think we talked about. It was the scientist.
We talked about entitlement. I think.
No, that was episode 2.
Oh, really? I think you're episode 9. I think you're. If I have to look at my phone, I think you were episode 9, and we're talking about what are people entitled to, or something along those lines.
Oh, maybe that. I thought we started with Nikola Tesla. Oh. We've covered a lot of subjects. So,
yeah.
The entitlement, that's starting to ring some bells. Yeah. So now that we're past this pandemic, and you really started Truth Island podcast as this journey through empathy. This is the way I look at it anyway. These are my words.
That's good to hear that.
You wanted to kind of descend down into the abyss of empathy, human empathy, and how that informed your philosophical motivations was quite apparent, right? You would always highlight how these certain findings would drive these essential questions. And that's really how your podcast operates, right? Like you approach something logically and rationally with a vicious mindset, right?
Wow.
Like viciously rational. And then you connect it to the way people feel almost in like a zeitgeist. Would you say that's accurate?
I like what you said about empathy, because I think that a lot of our problems in this world are caused by human cruelty.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, what's up? Are people just coming out mean? Are these 2-year-olds just evil to begin with? And I think a lot of it is through ignorance, and because people don't approach life through a rational mindset, and they act on emotion, they act on false information. So I think that while sounding rational might sound boring, I think it's the best weapon we have towards combating cruelty.
Right. But the thing is like, it doesn't sell.
It doesn't.
You know what? I'm going to play devil's advocate this whole podcast because I know we agree on a lot of things, but here's the truth, right?
Yeah.
The way this system works is at the end of the day, if you're not making something that people want, the value of that thing in this society is lessened, right? If you're not building something that people want, and typically they pay for things they want, the value in what you do and the ideologic in the position of the ideology today in our society is that it's valued less. Would you say that that's accurate?
I hear what you're saying. This is something I grapple with every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of replace that question with, what do I want?
Right.
And you have to keep asking yourself that time and time again, because you can give people what they want and you can feel good about yourself for a little bit. But as you go further down that rabbit hole, you're going to realize that you're betraying yourself more and more and more and more, and you're going to find yourself alone within yourself.
Mm.
So for me, you're right. Being rational, being philosophical, methodical, non-provocative, it doesn't sell. You're 100. I can't even argue that. You're 110% right. You're right about that. But at the same time, in order for one to live a fulfilling life, they need to do what they personally find fulfilling, regardless of whether it sells or doesn't sell.
So if you had to prioritize your philosophy, we'll make it into kind of like a gobstopper analogy.
Sure.
Right? There's always layers to a person. There's always layers to a philosophy. There's layers to belief. But at the core is usually one belief, one philosophical driver. Do you know what yours is?
I'm starting to understand, and it's in the infancy stages. I won't say it's fully developed. What I've come talking, 176 episodes, talking to a lot of people, I've come to the realization that most people don't see other people. They do not see them whatsoever.
Can you elaborate on that?
I think that when people are talking with one another, they have an inability to actually think, like to enter the mind of somebody else. And it's impossible to fully do that.
Right.
But I think people are so caught up in themselves thinking what they look like, what are they saying? When they're having a conversation with somebody, they're instantly thinking, how am I going to reply to that? What's going to be my clever retort? What's going to be my witty joke?
Mm.
And there's a lot of just not hearing and seeing other people. Because I think that when people start hearing and seeing one another, that's when goodness comes out. Because once you can hear and see somebody, you validate their humanity. You accept that they can feel pain and joy and happiness, and now you're going to treat them accordingly.
Wow, that was an incredibly beautiful answer, and you're a much better person than I am, because that would, if I would respond something.
Well, I have
similar,
you all fooled right now. So.
Right, I would have been throwing in some negativity there, like a little negativity paprika, maybe. There's a little too much salt in Alexander's answer. Like.
I think negativity can keep you in check.
I agree.
I think that because there's a lot of people who are very idealistic in this world, and sometimes my episodes are extremely dark. I've talked about some very dark things, and I realize that if it's darkness with a period, then it just remains dark. But if it's darkness with a comma, meaning like this is really upsetting, this is really bad, but what are we going to do to fix it? It's not so dark. But in order to make this world better, you have to deal with human ugliness. If you don't deal with human ugliness, nothing gets better.
I love the answer that you start out with acknowledging the person for what they are, which is another living thing first. Like that's your baseline.
Yes.
And it sounds really stupid and simple to say, but you're right. Very few people do that. A lot of people, I think, view humanity as pins in a bowling, in like a bowling match. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like you're part of the game. You kind of have to be there to keep score.
Yeah.
Right. But at the end of the day, it's like they'll bowl right over you to deliver themselves a strike. It's like you can't bowl without the pins, right? You can't operate through the world without involving yourself with humanity. But there isn't this ritual of respect, I guess, with other people. Do you think that this is...
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you're a bowling ball, right?
Sure.
Do you think the pins like you?
Probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of people operate, is that they want to achieve something. They want to, like the bowling ball wants to achieve a strike, or the owner of the bowling ball wants to. But if you treat everyone as a transaction or as a pin, you're not going to be remembered the way you think you will be.
Right.
So I think that, yes, you need to be assertive in what you want in this world, but if you treat people as transactional objects to be pushed out of the way, it'll come back.
I agree. It always does, right? Everything in life is in a cycle and in waveform. This whole idea that you can measure things linearly, I think, is the biggest fallacy we've ever been taught. It's like, okay, great. Digest this information from point A to point B. It's like the only things on this planet that even assume to think that way are human beings. And we constantly lead ourselves astray. It should be a thought of how you start in one place and it always circles back to the beginning again. So your choices, your karma, the things you decide to do, the habits that you follow through with, those loops all generate their own thing. And treating people poorly is definitely one. But we're kind of in this like interesting phenomenon now, right? Where the ghosts, the specters of that fake politeness are, being heavily unveiled to the public.
There's a good Facebook meme, and I know that Facebook is not the source of wisdom, but there's a good meme that I came across that said, most people are not good, they're simply polite. And I think that we're starting to see a lot more of that. I think a lot of the shadows and the veil is starting to be unraveled on a lot of people, that they have good PR, they have very good image, but when you actually look at their actions, there's a huge gap in their actions and in their behavior.
See, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with you being polite and not a good person.
Really?
Yeah. Like I'm okay with that. You know what I'm not okay with is you pretending to be someone better than you are, right? Like I'm good with you just being neutrally polite. Like we don't owe each other.
I love polite people.
Right.
So, yeah.
But it's different when you try to play me or someone or anyone, the American public, a fool. And start using like trigger words to inspire this like faux attitude that you clearly don't represent in your personal choices.
Well, let me give you an example of the polite that I'm talking about.
Okay.
I don't mean like holding open the door and giving up your seat to an elderly lady kind of polite. I find that like a lot of people have friends, and this is something that I discovered going through my 20s, is that a lot of people search for very polite friends or friends that don't challenge them in any such way. And because they're comfortable, they're comfy, cushiony friends, right? And a lot of them are polite and I'll be like, bro, you're doing wonderful. You're doing good, even when you're not doing so good.
Right.
And the question I ask with those people is, do they really care about you?
No,
They don't.
they don't.
So that's the kind of politeness I'm pointing out, where
Right.
they'll be like, hey man, that was awesome. Yeah, that was great. And a true friend will have a difficult conversation with you, even if it means risking that friendship.
That's a friend that I want.
Yes.
And that's the friend that I am. Like, I have no problem saying that. If I think that you're veering directly towards a cliff, I feel it's my fault as your friend if I don't bring this up. If I'm not, and there's a way to do it where it's like, listen, bro, we're all in this together. Like,
Yeah.
I got your six. What I need you to do, though, is to recognize the writing on the wall. If you continue with these choices, you're going to be suffering serious consequences. And I'll be there as much as I can. But with these kinds of consequences, you're going to start seeing friends of yours slip away because they don't want to deal with the aftermath. You're at a crossroads. I want someone to talk to me like that, right? And I will always be the guy to talk to my friend. It doesn't always work, right? But I see what you mean. It's different than polite, and it's more crocodilian. It's the same thing. It's like, I really believe honesty. You can be a terrible person and honest, and I'll still get along with you. Mm-hmm. As long as you're being completely real to whatever version of humanity you are, ugly or beautiful, I don't care. Just don't pretend, because then I have to work, right? Then I listen to what you say and I go, the tone in your voice isn't matching the energy of your intention. There is something duplicitous about this. Like, it's not just the plane isn't landing cleanly, right? I hear the plane landing, but I'm seeing the engine pull up. Like, why are there two different stories that are incongruent to each other? Something you're telling me isn't registering. And, that I feel like is the cause of most human problems. Am I wrong?
I think that love takes risks. So, and what that means is that if I am just being polite to you, one of the things you might want to ask yourself is, why is this guy being so polite to me? What does he want from me, right? Because you might just be like a lion, and I'm just trying to feed you and keep you happy, right? I'm just keeping you a part of my entourage, or I need something from you, or whatever it is. And if you really love somebody, then you'll take that risk and say something very brazen that might offend them, and you might lose that friendship and the assets that come with that friendship. Mm-hmm. But that's how you demonstrate love, is by risking it for the betterment of your friend or your loved one or spouse or whoever. This applies to any kind of relationship, in my opinion.
Don't you find it weird that for thousands of years there have been structures and programs, maybe not programs, because that sounds very modern post FDR. What I'm saying is there are societies, or there are even
New Deal friendship.
Yeah, right. There's the way, right? There's Bushido. There's even going to pubs in the colonial era.
Yeah.
Where men or women, whatever version, would go and they would reinforce these kinds of internal principles. This sense of gentleman, right? This sense of honor. Why don't we have that? We've descended into unruly PE class where it's just essentially bullying with dodgeballs, right? And that's the hierarchy that we're told. No, it's not that. It's actually a code of conduct, and how that code of conduct over time unlocks opportunities and trust, because the world is so fucking crazy. I can rely on you. Okay, John, I know you're not going to lie. I know you'll be honest. You always level with me. I'm going to trust you with my money. Just like that, because that's the way the real world works.
I think that what defined times previous to this is some kind of obstacle or adversary or something that created a fraternal brotherhood amongst men. In World War II, it's fighting Hitler. I think religion did a great job of giving people a prize to fight for. I think our society has become very materialistic, especially in the last few decades. And materialism provides distractions and it provides comfort. It doesn't give people a reason to fight, though. I'm not gonna sacrifice my life for my brother because of my Lexus car or something. So it doesn't give us like something that we're striving towards as a humanity, as a common species. Whereas I think in other epochs or periods of time, there was something that we were trying to build as a species, as a culture. And that allowed us to sacrifice for one another. And it was important to make sure that everyone was on board with those levels of sacrifices, because if someone wasn't on board, it could mess us all up. But now the stakes just aren't as high in that sense. I think they're very high in a spiritual sense, but maybe they're not high for most of us, at least in the US, in a like physical sense.
But there was a better framework back then. You know, and this is going to be a controversial thing to say, because obviously socially we're talking about a historical time period that's backwards compared to today in a lot of ways. Okay?
Yeah, for sure.
But also vice versa. And in my opinion, the paragons of virtue that were worshipped back in the day were very clear cut. Whereas now it's like maybe our Marvel heroes, right? Like who do we have?
Thor.
Yeah. Like who do we have? You know, like who do we really have who hasn't been shut down? Right. Like, but before it was, you know, plenty of famous and well-known personality figures that kind of resembled constraint and class and like a conservative classiness kind of thing. Like I'm not saying conservative and political. What I'm saying is not as liberal with free ideas, but just maintaining the cleanliness of our highways, right? They're not trying to repave paths to El Dorado, right? It's just making sure the garbage is kept off the highway so that cruising speed can be maintained, right? It's like it's more of an institutional like framework. But we don't have that anymore, do we? Instead, we've gone backwards. Instead, we have people getting butt naked on OnlyFans, you know, selling farts in jars while cities around the world are exploding and burning. Why aren't we reverting to the thousands of years of technology that you and I have talked about with philosophy to reinstitute these frameworks? Like, what is it about today that makes us so adversarial to even that thought?
Comfort. I think a lot of people are very comfortable in the worlds that they live in. And unfortunately, you know, we've had some bad times with the pandemic and, you know, events happening in the world war, but in Russia rather. But I think that a lot of us still live relatively undisturbed, comfortable lives. And we need something to kind of jolt us out of that. Now, I'm not wishing for something bad to happen, as you know, that would be foolish. But I think that times of hardship have created the best of us, because I think the attribute that you're alluding to is the attribute of restraint. And I think that, you know, through times of war, through any kind of difficulty, restraining oneself was a virtue, right? Because you're showing that I am sacrificing this pleasure of mine for some greater good.
Right.
But right now, you know, we live in a very consumer-based society. So in a consumer-based society, the virtue that you're trying to showcase is how much can I spend? How much do I have? How much comfort do I have access to? And that's kind of how we've come to define ourselves. You know, and not everyone, there's a lot of people that are struggling out there in America, but the people who are struggling out there in America, like, what are they trying to achieve? What's their main goal? If you ask any Joe off stability, or I want to be rich one day, right? So that's the goal. No one is actually sacrificing, like, I want to be a good person. I want to be a wise person. I want to help the people around me. I want to help my family. No one is, you know, we're not being instilled with those virtues. We're kind of idolizing, I guess, false idols, you know, as the Bible would say, false idols at this point. And I think that's the kind of calibration that we don't have right now.
But here's the problem I have with that. I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is where my negative brain comes in.
I love it.
You know, because you know me, I'm a tactician. Like I'm a strategist really at heart. And so I ask myself, okay, what is the current like formula to where we are today? And that formula involves a tremendous amount of manipulation, right? We're in an era where our cell phones are listening. Our advertisements know what we want before we want it. Facebook is aware that you're pregnant before you know you're pregnant. That's a fact, actually, that has happened. And so there's almost like a pre-crime, like a pre-thought, you know, like almost like an ESP element to our technology and our process, all of which directly manipulate you into making you want and do specific things. So if that's the case, why isn't it we're being manipulated into being better people? And so I guess my question for you is, why? And do you think it's intentional?
I think that there's an evil guy with a white beard trying to tear us apart? No, I don't think that. I do think that we don't really value what we've lost. And I think that we have lost, like, what do we value? We value being with people. Mm-hmm. We value meaningful exchanges with human beings like we're having right now. We miss doing things for the sake of doing them. Like, mm-hmm. a lot of people do things like have conversations, but they want some kind of monetary return or some kind of viewership return or something, right. some kind of payoff on it, right? So I think that we need to kind of feel good about ourselves. We need to ask ourselves what makes us feel good. And we need to kind of train our minds into realizing, hey, just being with my friends and cracking jokes all day, that's a lot of fun.
Right.
So I think that the way we break this code is by start doing the things that we used to enjoy, and we kind of find a way to start doing them again. And the exact pathway and the exact details of how we break the algorithm code, we can have many different ways or different opinions on how to do that. I think it just starts by sitting down with people and everyone just putting their phone away. I think something as tiny as that can actually kind of recreate some of that.
That's never going to happen. Like, that putting down the phone, that can't exist. Like, we're in a freight train and it's taken us 1,000 years to get this fucker rolling.
Remember I said something about most people are polite?
Mm-hmm.
So if you went over to someone's house and they said, right. Hey, could we all just put our phones away for a moment? It may not be the most polite thing to say that, right? It's not right. that polite. Come on, dude, it's a party. I don't want to put my phone away. Yeah. But the host of that party who says, hey guys, can we all just put our phones away? He knows in the back of his mind that there's going to be some magic if people just put their phones and start talking to one another and start right. hearing and listening to one another again. So that's why I say we kind of have to break free of the politeness and start breaking free into what's going to actually make us feel good and give our lives meaning once again. And it's something, again, is that the solution? No, but it's a step in that direction.
I agree with cell phones being a detriment to the things that we care about the most. But when we think about making a decision today in 2022, some sort of leadership decision, some sort of philosophical conduct that we can instill in the minds of Americans or abroad.
Yeah.
Putting down your cell phone isn't going to do it, though.
But it's a start. You see, I think that we get bogged down with the larger details and we ignore the smaller steps. It's, you've been to the gym, I've been to the gym, we know what it's like. And I know that the people who go to the gym and say to themselves, I'll never have a six-pack, I'll never be buff, I'll never be Arnold Schwarzenegger, they get nowhere. But that guy who's like, I'm going to do 10 minutes on the treadmill, he's the guy that I have faith in. He's the guy that I know is going somewhere. So I wouldn't undersell the putting the cell phone away thing. It's a small step, it's minutia, but people put their cell phones away. They start talking to each other face to face again. They start hearing each other. They start listening to one another. Because one of the things that I've noticed about with smartphones is people's attention span is completely shot, completely gone, right? And we have all of this.
Really bad.
And maybe I'm just a really boring person. Okay, fair enough. And I'll be saying something, and then someone will cut me off midstream, like, "Hey, did you guys see this?" And it just goes forth. And I think that's a part of the dehumanization that we're going through. Because before cell phones, you kind of had to listen to a boring person, right? If someone was really boring in your life, you had to just sit down and grin and bear it, no matter how boring they were. But there was something to be said. Like, we think it's just an empty ritual, but maybe if you got through the first 5 minutes of boringness, maybe that conversation went somewhere special. Maybe they had some nuggets of wisdom, or maybe they had an interesting tale that you listened to. We're not actually giving people the chance to do that anymore, because we're immediately listening to someone for 30 seconds. We're finding them boring and we're shifting the conversation, pulling at our phones. So that's what I said about evil being rooted in not seeing other people. I think that phone prevents us from seeing and hearing other people. And again, any small step in seeing and hearing people again is going to get us in the right direction.
There's always, I'm going to play some devil's advocate here.
I love it, man.
Now, at the same time, we have events going on now that if it wasn't for cell phones, we wouldn't understand the depths of the pain that some human beings around the world are experiencing. For example, what's going on in Yemen.
Yeah.
Or what's going on now in Ukraine. Only when it's in Ukraine are people caring about it a little bit more, So the cell phones, internet, everything has shown a light onto the intricacies of those kinds of choices and how they affect us. So in your mind, do you feel that it's still a net positive?
Again, cell phone is a tool like any other tool. And you're absolutely right. A Russian soldier will think twice before hitting someone or doing something because they know it's going to be filmed and the international press is going to get a hold of it. But video cameras had that same function as well. So I think that it can be used to expose bad behavior. Mm-hmm. It's good. It can connect people that otherwise, like there was a period of time you were living in Atlanta, and without Zoom, you and I could not talk. Like we could not talk to one another. Yeah. So I think if the tool is used appropriately, it's a wonderful asset. But I think it's the curbing of the tool. Like my question is this. If you're in Atlanta and the only way that you and I can have a meaningful conversation is through Zoom, let's do it. Mm-hmm. But if you and I are in person, why is any one of us on our phones? Like, why are we on our phones if you and I are sitting in the same room staring at one another eye to eye? And that's where we're using this technology inappropriately, I would say.
How do you see the perversion of human connection over the next 150 years? Right? Because we're talking like 40 years, right? Like internet was invented when? Like in 1984?
Yeah, I had my first computer, I think, 1998, a Pentium 1,
yeah,
28K dial-up.
Right. So the 80s, let's just call it the 80s, right? So what, almost 40 years?
Yeah, for sure.
That's not a long time, right? And so what we're talking about is the detachment, kind of like a shuttle connected to the International Space Station. We've just blown up the bolts. We're starting to separate, and over time, there'll be a grander difference of distance between what was a docked part of the International Space Station and now a free-floating entity. We're now free-floating, flying away from being docked in human connection, having that kind of like location-based community around our churches or our AA meetings, or all of these different types of meets, these these meeting grounds, these little campfires of humanity that we've created for hundreds of years. That's all going away. And now, how do you see the perversion of human connection? If you see it perverted, maybe not. Maybe you see it as expanded. But how do you see human connection evolving on a philosophical level?
It depends if we have a revelation or don't have a revelation. So if we don't have a revelation, we continue to go down this course. Every human being is going to become increasingly lonelier and lonelier and lonelier, and they're going to feel isolated, and depression is going to kick in. I think that if we don't course correct now, it's going to be a very lonely world for each of us, and no one is going to be able to escape that. Because even if you're the one enlightened individual, if you're going out there and you're just speaking to the drones and everyone's like, you're going to feel just as alone. So there's not going to be any escape for anyone. I do see a brighter future where we do course correct and we just set rules. I think things can be solved. Like, religion is all about rules, right? It's all about setting rules and finding out when they're appropriate. And I think setting rules of like, hey, we have a designated time where human beings need to interact. Like, I think that, how we always have all these doctors saying you need to exercise 30 minutes a day and eat broccoli. We need that kind of same level of emphasis of like human beings need to talk to each other 1 hour a day or something like that. We need that kind of like health initiative when it comes to socialization, because human beings that aren't socializing, because why do we have purpose? Like, what gives us purpose? Our relation to who?
Oh, you're asking me, why do I have purpose is really my relationship to myself and what I feel like I'm building for others. And my self-worth is tied into how I feel that I've done something that benefits a 1-to-2 ratio, right? Like one person is making 2 people happy. I'm good with that. If I can make 2 other people happy, including myself, I've done an amazing job.
You said something very interesting to me offline before we started. You said, I hope I have someone to share this with.
Yes.
So we do things, yes, we do it for ourselves, but we also do it for others as well, right? And you have to find that balance, because if you're just serving others, you're betraying yourself to some degree, right? So you can't go that far in that direction. So if we're living in these ultra isolated lives, and we have no affirmation from the outside world, no connection with other people, it's going to corrode our sense of purpose. And I think nothing good can come from that.
So let's put it on the flip side. When we think about sense of purpose, do you think it's like a biological material thing? Like, okay, so you know how you do certain things, you get serotonin, right? You do certain things, you get a certain chemical release, right? Do you think that it's just hearing people talk and having a conversation, or is it in person, shake hands, eye to eye, you're under a blanket of trees, you're in some sort of different setting with different smells, you know, you feel sunshine maybe on your left shoulder, a little bit warmer than your right, or occasionally you hear the buzzing of a fly, or in New York standards, you know, the honking of a cab, you know, and the slow echoing sound of a Starbucks coffee cup slightly missing a garbage can. You know, that's like New York. Do you think that it's that kind of composition of senses that accumulate into that human connection, or can you get the same feelings by logging into the metaverse and talking to Joe Schmo halfway across the world as your avatar?
I think environment plays a small role. Like, there can be atmospheric conditions, like it's a picnic or something and the sun is just shining in the right way and you feel really good and you really feel good to the person that you're talking to. Yeah. But you can develop a relationship talking with someone on Zoom. I think we had some excellent conversations on Zoom as well. So it's not the technology itself. It's not the fact that I'm not physically in close proximity to you that's bothering me. Right. It's the decorum and the way and the etiquette that we're using when talking to one another. So if we're talking on Zoom, but we're listening to one another and still having that elongated conversation, and I'm repeating things that you said and you're repeating things that I said, and we're hearing and acknowledging each other and seeing each other, it's still working out. It's only when that technology is killing your attention span and it's diverting your eyes elsewhere instead of the person right in front of you. So I think physically sitting in front of you makes it harder for you to turn away, right? Because then it would be very impolite. Like I always tell people, in the olden days, there was a way to distract yourself when you were with others, and that was to take out a newspaper, right? Like guys would go around and they would go to a bar, and if there was no one there, they would take out their newspaper. But the thing about reading a newspaper is that you would never read the newspaper at dinner, right? Like if you were having like a formal dinner or a formal get together, you would think that person had some serious social problems if they just were there. It was a lively party, and there was just some dude reading a newspaper at that lively party. It would look weird. Yeah. But plenty of people read the newspaper on their phone at a party and so forth. So that's what I mean, that the technology is killing our attention span. It's kind of destroying the etiquette and the rules of conversation. And that's what I'm most afraid of, not the actual how close am I? Because some people in this world, I have friends that live in Europe, and it's like the only way I'm going to be able to talk with them is on FaceTime, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I do love doing FaceTime, honestly.
Yeah, but it's great.
This whole metaverse push, and my recent fascination with black holes and simulation theory. I've been going down that rabbit hole. So I've made it. I haven't signed up for QAnon, so I guess I didn't get brainwashed so easily. Is really nagging me. It's really nagging me because all of this invention, the millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars that went into developing this other world. And yet there's no etiquette to fixing the one that we have now. It's like we'd rather build a Mark Zuckerberg land then fix our roads, or, get back into any church, any kind of church, you know what I'm saying? Like, or temple. Like, I don't care what your religion is. There are circles of power in the world that you go and you reinforce these habits, which is decency, honesty, integrity, and following through something bigger than yourself. We don't have that. So what do? We build the metaverse. What's up with that? Why?
My answer to that is, I think misery will follow you wherever you are, no matter what world it is that you create or what world you escape to. So whether we escape to the metaverse, whether we escape to Mars, if we don't fix the things that are internally wrong with us, that misery is going to follow us wherever we go. And I think that if people aren't listening to one another, you could be being snubbed or ignored on the metaverse, or you could be ignored on Mars, or it could be right here on Earth.
Right.
So if we don't fix those fundamental issues, no matter what universe we create, that misery and that loneliness is going to follow us there. So, and honestly, I think that these other worlds, right? I don't know too much about the metaverse, but Mars is a pretty tough place to live, right? Doesn't it get freezing cold and hot there? And there's no oxygen and so forth. So I always scratch my chin and say, how are we going to build a better sense of community in spacesuits where there's no oxygen when we can't even do it here on Earth, where we're able to hug and breathe and do all that good stuff?
Yeah, we're not. We're going to land a few people on Mars. We're going to terraform it into something livable, and then some dictator is going to plant the flag. We know that's going to happen, right? I mean, let's be honest with each other. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's almost like watching a slug crawl across something is going to leave some residue behind. I feel like humanity, there's always that double-edgedness. I don't know if have you ever heard of a trophic cascade?
No idea.
It's this new understanding in the natural sciences, particularly around an animal, the Canadian gray wolf, the gray wolf in America, which we rid out of the United States because it was destroying our cattle. It'd just be eating one of our largest exports. So we would shoot them dead. And we haven't had them here for a very long time. A few years ago, it got reintroduced right before that motorcycle trip I took. And essentially what happened is all of the deer, the elk that were hanging around the riverbanks were so used to not having a predator. They were completely confused when they saw this carnivorous wolf around the corner. And so they started to die off, right? Okay, totally natural. So what happened? All of a sudden, on the riverbanks, reeds started growing, tripling in population, so that fish eggs could be laid in the reeds. So now fish started tripling. Then fowl, large water birds, were starting to become more aware of fish. So beaver became more prominent. They built more dams. They created more wetlands. So you were seeing a 10x on multiple different animals, plants, things like that, that created what is called a trophic cascade, which is one single thing affecting many. In my opinion, the philosophies that we're bringing up today could be a trophic cascade into the things that we need to do. The structures of understanding, the structures of meaning, and the emphasis on the power of things that you cannot hold all draw people into a sense of goodness. But here's my question for you. Do you see one trophic cascade going on today that's leading us in a positive direction? Can you name one?
Wow. Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah, right?
This is taking way too long.
I think this is just gut feeling right now, is I think that most people are starting to realize that something is wrong, but they can't articulate it, and you can't really fix something that you can't articulate, right? Because it's I think of a teenager who's angry at his father, but he doesn't know that he's angry at his father, so he's just really, really, really angry. And I think that's where we're at right now. And it's good that we're starting to get angry and we're starting to get upset at our lives. I think the first step is, I always say, the start of any great change is suffering. And I think that it's
probably true.
Yeah, and I think that for a long time, this new technology was just we were just seeing the blessing of it and just getting carried away in how wonderful it is. And now we're starting to suffer from it. And again, I'm not a sadist and want people to just unnecessarily suffer, but I think the first stage is suffering. People are lonely, they're on antidepressants and doing all sorts of other things to try and cope. And I'm hoping this very negative thing turns to a positive when they've exhausted, every other corner. Like I'm waiting. Like we have to, people are going to try. People try and do the easiest things first before they do the most difficult thing. Right. So people are going to try and go on spiritual retreats or do whatever kind of new age thing it is to try and combat the loneliness. And then they'll realize, wait a minute, it's just good old-fashioned human interaction and being a decent person and listening to people and helping people that actually makes me feel good. So, right. But I think that first humans have to play this. We're an interesting species. We have to do this little dance where we try all the things that won't work before we get to the thing that
like
does
teenagers.
Work. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how similar that is? And we can point to examples of philosophical cycles, right? Like, for example, maybe we're nearing our enlightenment, right? Maybe we're nearing the enlightenment into a new renaissance, but it's always darkest just before the dawn, right? It's funny. Most like prophecies of that sort always say there'll be like there'll be a great storm or something cataclysmic before it becomes better, and I think that's true with life. I think to get better in this world, there has to be something that you're trying to overcome. And I think up until this point, we haven't been really good at articulating what it is that we're trying to overcome, because it's not so obvious anymore. Like in earlier times, the thing you were trying to overcome was not starving to death. And that's a really important mission. Not starving to death is a really, really awesome quest to go on. Like, hey, I'm going to wake up, and if I don't work, I'm going to starve. That just gives us a grounding and a sense of purpose. Right. This is the first time in humanity that, I'm only talking about the United States. I'm not, obviously there's other areas of the world where, survival and food is still an issue. But at least in, the developed world, we're at a point where, most of us are going to get fed one way or another. It may not be high quality food or organic or whatever, but, we will eat. And I think that we're now at a point where we need a sense of purpose. And I think that this suffering, this like existential dread and this separation that we have from one another, we have to go through it first before we can find what it is that makes us happy and what it is that brings our life meaning. Now, before our recording today, I was kind of just reflecting on some conversations you and I have had.
Good.
And what we haven't talked about.
Yeah, let's do it.
And one of the few things that have been coming up is really the recent discoveries in like microbial life and the developments of cameras and photography within microbial life, and how it's getting so proficient into how we see these different worlds like that are at our on our literal fingertips every day, all the time, that we have no understanding about, and how if we're able to zoom out on a macro level, we're able to see, different like universal firmaments and like where they end and where they begin, like boundaries. Where does the frontier of the meaning of life begin and end,
So and we could be someone's hair stubble for all we know.
For all we know. And so, I'm just curious, like how you've been responding to these, these tetrograde, right? Is that right, Nacho? Tetrograde? Something like the tetrograde is the microbial animal that can survive in a volcano, the bottom of the ocean, and in outer space. And it looks like a bear tied up in like cushions, like a Michelin Man. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
So they found this new amazing life form.
Wow.
Called the tetrograde, and they call it the something bear, the snow bear, maybe.
Snow bear.
Because it looks like a bear. It looks like a bear in a hazmat suit.
Klondike bar or Coca-Cola bear?
Yeah, right. Probably neither. I mean, it does look like if a pig or a polar bear was in a hazmat suit. Oh, that's how it looks. And water bear. That's what it's called. Yeah, water
bear.
And it can survive in outer space, in the bottom of the ocean, and in a volcano. In the most like extreme example. So what's my point? What am I getting to? The point is that as we're expanding into this new idea of the world, where we're sending satellites, the Cassini satellite to try to find water in different Saturn moons, We're discovering all of these little microbial life forms. We're broadening out into outer space. What kind of like philosophical ahas, some eureka moments, do you think is pending on what the meaning of life is, right? Where does life end? Where does life begin? And what's our role in it? Do you think it's getting to a point where we are entering a new biosphere of philosophical understanding with what the meaning of life is?
So I think I've mentioned this to you before. If you watch any science fiction movie and the aliens come down from space, right? The spaceship lands and the aliens get out. They all are from the same planet. They all speak the same language, and they're all in lockstep. They're all they're on the same page, right? And when it comes to like space exploration, I think Earth needs the equivalent of that. We all, as human beings, we need to start looking at ourselves as Earthlings. I think when I think of other planets and other distant places, I'm like, what's the implication for this? Now, obviously, it has a different implication for Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? He's like, the cosmos and the cluster galaxy or whatever it is. I'm not a science guy, in case anyone hasn't realized. But when I see all of these other planets, I say to myself, if all these other planets are out there and they have other life forms and so forth, we need to start acting like Earthlings. We need to get our act together, and we need to start becoming a unified planet. And I think that the only way that we can take ourselves seriously is if we have our act together and we're acting as a unified planet. Because I can't imagine any scientific, in Star Trek or any kind of science fiction context, Earth is always a planet within itself. It's like the planet Earth is within the galactic senate or something, right? It's not like, this is East Earth and this is West Earth, or right, or East Mars and West Mars, right? Like it's a unified thing. So every time we further out into the solar system, I always say to myself, what are we doing to become a unified planet? Because I think before we even can think about conquering other planets, this planet needs to be rock solid. We need to be all seeing each other as human beings. And if we're not seeing each other as human beings, if we can't have order on this planet, we're only bringing chaos and destruction to whatever planet we visit.
What do you think would be our biggest export? Like not on a material level, but on a cultural level? Like if...
To an alien?
Yeah.
What could we teach an alien, man? We could teach them how to screw up in some. I feel like there's so many ways that we could teach them. If aliens are watching us, there's so many we should not do that moments, right? There's like so many moments where they're looking at us like that's something not to do. So I think we can use that as a guide though, and say, what would we bring to the table, right?
Right.
I think there's this idea that and I think we talked about this before, that if people are like, why don't the aliens come out? Why don't they just come out and announce themselves and land in DC?
Yeah.
And I think the aliens realize we're not ready for it. They know, if they do exist, I think as a species, we haven't gone to that level of knowing what it is to sacrifice yourself in some way for some kind of larger good. Because I think that other planets or other ecosystems, I'm sorry, my science vocabulary is very low in this area, but I think that in order to colonize other planets or do any of this other stuff, there's a certain collective common mission that they have. Like aliens have a sense of purpose. You know what I mean? Like to build a ship and develop light speed, they have to have a solid sense of purpose. And that's something that we don't have a collective purpose yet.
Is that a good thing? Right? Because I kind of think about that philosophy in terms of financial markets, right? The competition within itself is almost a cleansing feature. It's almost like running water over rocks, right? If the water is running too slow, you're going to collect some algae, But because there's a mixture and there's a little bit of a torrent within, there's almost this like natural kind of filtration, right? And that's a natural law as well, right? Like in order to filter out water, or in order, how does the oceans filter itself out? Like what do the ecosystems do to kind of cleanse itself, both of too much life or too little life? There's always a cycle of birth and death within that. So do you think it's possible that our cycle of humanity, both having birth and death in like a metaphorical way, the messiness of humanity, the poor choices, that cycle of birth and death is a strength?
I think every species wants to preserve itself. I think that's like at the root of a lot of what we're doing. There's a lot of things that humans do that kind of don't fit in line with that goal, which is nuclear weapons and the threat of using those nuclear weapons and kind of blasting each other into oblivion. Yeah. So I think human beings, other animals do go to war with each other. I think chimpanzees actually have really brutal...
Dolphins.
Dolphin wars? I gotta check that out.
Ants.
Ant wars. So I think it's natural, but I think the way that human beings have gotten so good at eliminating one another or conquering or subjecting one another, it kind of, in the long run, like it will allow one breed or one tribe of human to strive, but in the long run, it's going to lead to our extinction. And I think that I think that these things, like I always say something, and this is something I always want, you love the Roman Empire.
Oh, love it. Can't talk enough about it.
And I want to posit this with you.
Okay.
Imagine nuclear weapons had been created during the Roman Empire. Think about the level. Now, I want you to think about the level of morals and ethics. Right. Imagine you got nuclear warheads and Caligula is your Roman emperor.
Oh my God.
The world would have been destroyed, right?
Destroyed, easily.
So I always say to myself, like, one thing I'm grateful is that all of our technological advancements have always magically been parallel to our moral advancements. Like, I don't think the people during the Roman Empire could have handled nuclear weapons. I think that they were not operating at a sophisticated enough moral level to understand what it is that they're doing. So I always say to myself, like this technology is good, but I always find it fascinating. It always seems to go hand in hand with what we're capable of holding and dealing with. So I'm hoping that pattern continues. I hope that we're not introduced to some new technology which we're not morally capable of handling.
It's interesting how this moral dilemma isn't a law. Like there's one law within humanity that is always apparent to me, which is that there's always good and evil in balance. Everything that we know, see, touch, feel, think has the same balance. Like, for example, at the center of our universe, our mixture of gas, which has somehow created this place, which is fucking crazy to think about. In the dead center of that is a black hole eating it all up. So at the very heart, you have the most destructive force we've ever discovered. But around it is the most celestial life we've ever found. I feel like this is kind of a thing with every single aspect of being earthborn, is that you always have this discussion between destruction and creation. It's like we're self-destructing ourselves, but creating these amazing technologies, or even like what you're saying, these moral discoveries within the process. And our struggle between those 2 points is really our human story.
There's something beautiful about destruction. People fear destruction because we have a tendency to try and preserve ourselves and preserve the way it is. But sometimes the way it is killing us. It's destroying. Like if older civilization, like if the Roman Empire had never fallen, we would never have gotten to the United States. So like everything that gets destroyed, something better, or at least hopefully something better, takes its place. And I think sometimes we're afraid to destroy something that's not working for us. Could be even just a marriage or a relationship, because we're afraid of the unknown. I think human beings have a great fear of uncertainty, so we try and preserve. But destruction has an element. It's important. You need to destroy old habits, old tendencies, old behaviors. So destruction is not something we should run from. It's something that we should embrace. And I'm not advocating nuking the whole world.
No, definitely not. I know you well enough to do that. And just make sure this mic is up to your mouth.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's interesting you brought up the Roman Empire and the destruction of that. And I know you like history just like I do.
Sure.
What is up with the Roman eagle, like being reborn in multiple time periods?
Oh, for the United States? Yeah.
Well, even more than that.
Yeah.
Right? You have ancient Rome, then you have Napoleon.
It's on the Mexican flag too, right?
Oh, you're right. It is on the Mexican flag. Then you have Napoleon carrying literally the eagle standard. Then the eagle standard goes to Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Then from Nazi, you know what I'm saying? It's like This is a total right angle from what we were talking about, but it's kind of like we're talking about cycles, really, right? Like birth, death, birth, death. I find it interesting how humanity finds these patterns that need to be replicated. And I don't know how much of it is actually conscious, and how much forgiveness should we be giving ourselves as a species to allow these kind of unconscious patterns? Like, is that the hallmark of humanity?
I think that, this is why I'm a student of history, and I encourage people to study history as much as possible, because if you see one of these pernicious patterns reemerging in some new form, if you're aware of history, you can kind of spot it out and be like, well, this kind of seems something similar that was tried out in ancient Rome, and maybe we ought to not go here, because the one constant is our human nature, I would say. So I think that yes, the technology and yes, the forms of government change, but our human nature pretty much remains static throughout all of these events. So if we know human nature, we know what systems are going to work and not work. So I think it's just a question of being vigilant and being aware of what's been tried in the past and failed miserably and what has worked.
We once launched a probe, like basically this little rocket into outer space, filled with all of the human parts of ourselves.
Oh, does it have a Beatles record in there?
It has a Beatles Imagine, I think, is playing. I believe that there were, voice recordings from the president at the time or any major leaders, like major speeches, zipped out into outer space.
Yeah, I think is it a golden record or something it was preserved on?
Of course it's golden.
Golden vinyl, right?
Yeah, golden vinyl, right? Do you think that was smart?
I think that
philosophically, do you think that it's good to assume that the people who would accept the probe would be better natured?
I say yes. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if we did not do that, it means that humanity had given up on itself. So if we did not believe that, these aliens, they might like John Lennon's Imagine or whatever, right? If we just said, no, let's not do that, then I think that's an admission that we as human beings are beyond repair and messed up and we have nothing to offer, right? So if we never sent that probe out, it would be like, we're an evil, fiendish species, and surely if some aliens found us, they would want to destroy us immediately. So the fact that we had enough optimism and confidence to say, hey, we're not all that bad. We're not all that bad. And maybe these aliens might like this. I think it shows hope in humanity. The people who were launching that said, we're not all that bad. We're decent enough that maybe someone will see that decency. Not in everyone, but in most of us. And they'll keep us alive for it.
So taking that logic in mind, what is the one thing that an average person can do in their day, which is equivalent to sending out their own probe?
I'm a writer and a podcaster, obviously. So I think that, I think about what people are leaving behind, and it manifests on the individual's aptitudes, right? So not everyone can be a writer. Not everyone is articulate. Not everyone is a musician or something. But I think cultivating some type of talent, and giving it to the world, I think, is the best thing you can do. Now some people are going to be listening, well, what if I don't have a special talent? Then you can touch someone else's life. If you really feel like there's nothing that you have to offer, you're never going to be a musician or a writer or something like that, you can always create a positive impression in someone else's life.
I think that's the perfect thing to leave on. Amazing philosophical advice. Aaron, it's good to see you, buddy.
It's been an hour. That's crazy.
I know. It's been longer than an hour, right? It's been like an hour 10.
Absolutely. I hope this is first of many.
Oh, definitely. All right, guys, make sure to check out his podcast, Truth Island Podcast on Spotify. Thank you so much for watching Soho Convo, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.